Thanks. Good morning. Hey, we're really spread out. It was a little different here, but David, I'm really happy to be here because it combines two things that I really care a lot about, and it's writing and making. I'm a writer. I was an English major in college, and what I learned to do professionally was to write about technology and explain how things work to other people, and became a publisher and started a business. And I'll talk a little bit about that today, but I kind of want to know that actually professionally, it all started by being really a technical writer and learning how to understand how things work, sometimes by getting an expert to explain it to me, an expert who couldn't explain it directly to, say, a consumer or a user needed, and a lot of it came from also just valuing my own experience as a user of computers and things, and saying, that doesn't make sense to me. How does it work? Even though they say it should work that way, it doesn't. And exploring that and going in that direction. So I'm going to talk about sort of hands-on maker culture, and I think the third thing that I'm deeply interested in is getting more kids engaged in making. There's something really special here, and something sadly different. This used to be more common. It used to be ordinary. We used to have kids making things all the time. Today, it's almost radical to say some of these things. So let me start with a story about a grist mill. This is in Napa County in California. And I came upon a grist mill. This is what it looks like. It's the Old Bale Grist Mill. And if you see there on the right is a large water wheel. There's very little water in the Napa Valley, especially during the summer. And so they had to build what's called an overshot water wheel. It directs the water on top of the water wheel, and the gravity spins the wheel, whereas probably on the East Coast you've seen most of your water wheels sunk into water, and the rushing of the stream causes it to move. But there it is coming in from the top, and just show you, those are the gears that it turns, and those are the stones that do the grinding, and that's what we get out of it. We get flour. Okay, so it's a pretty complicated process. It's a structure that was built in the 1840s, right before the gold rush, and a mill was something that was pretty important for a community to have. It was infrastructure that allowed people to grow wheat, and it was a central meeting place for people to come. But when I visited there, I asked them, like, how do you build a mill in the frontier in the 1840s? I mean, you can't go buy a mill, and you probably don't have any experts around to build a mill. And I was talking to the fellow, and he said, well, there was a book at the time. It was called The Young Millwright's Guide, and it was written by a man named Oliver Evans. And if you could flip it, yeah. And it was published in the 1790s. And so it became a book that described the science and the theory and the practice of building mills. And it's a really fascinating book. But Evans was an inventor himself from the Philadelphia area. And he said a biography says he was characterized by two things. One, a compulsive urge to invent, and secondly, a zeal for publishing technical information for the guidance of young men. As an inventor, he went broke. He didn't make a thing off of many, many different inventions, including early steam engines, but refinements to the mill. But he wrote the book. If you go, he said the reason why a book of this kind, although so much wanted, did not sooner appear, may be because they who have been versed in science and literature have not had practice and experience in the arts, and they who have practice and experimental knowledge have not had time to acquire science and theory. And so he says, sensible of my deficiencies in both, I should not have undertaken it, was I not interested in the explanation of my own inventions. But he creates this book, that describes how to really, the people that built the mill were probably ordinary carpenters and other people who had built some kinds of structures. But how big of a water wheel? How do you figure out the gears? Where do you get the materials? What is the ratio between that wheel and the power it generates? So, and it's full of diagrams. It's very visual. It's quite a remarkable book. And lastly, one of the things that's kind of fascinating, in the back of the book, of the first edition, is a list of the subscribers. Now, in the early frontier, early American history, the way you published a book is you got people to pay for it before you printed it. And those were your subscribers. And what I didn't know, though, until I saw this book, is that they often printed the list of subscribers in the back of the book. And it's a nice list there. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Edmund Randolph, Aaron Burr. They were all subscribers. And the docent who was talking to me about this book explained, he said, you could almost think of this list as an early social network. It told you who else had this book. And if you had a question, are you trying to build a mill? Are you trying to do this? Who else had this in their library? So I like this story for a number of reasons. One is it generally shows something about the democratization of technology. How does it spread? How do we learn to do new things? And Evan's book, goes through like 18 printings. And, again, he wrote it in 1790, and this mill is built in 1840. I can find on Google, editions in through 1860. So it had a really long life as a valuable resource. But what I also like about it is it's technical writing. It's a kind of writing that we don't often talk about. And it's the kind of writing that, my company, O'Reilly, has been doing in a different way for a different, on a different frontier, and that's really the internet. We write deeply technical books about how to build things, how the internet works, how to do applications, everything from websites to iPhone apps to all kinds of sort of very technical things. But Tim O'Reilly and I, we were English majors. We weren't technologists. We came at this kind of fresh because we actually liked the writing. We liked the books. We liked doing this. And I think, and also we, in the process, met a lot of smart people who needed help communicating about what they were doing, what they had built, and how it worked. So we have as a tagline, spreading the knowledge of technology innovators. And we do it through publishing. We do it through conferences, face-to-face, as well as in increasingly digital form. And we're starting our 7th year. I started a magazine called Make, partly because I was seeing that innovators were building physical things again. They were playing with technology. And actually, this has pretty deep roots in the computer industry. The Apple computer comes from a group of tinkerers, Steve Wozniak. Early hackers at MIT. They were builders of things. They created their own, in many ways, they invented the personal computer because they wanted one themselves. They couldn't get it from a company, so as hobbyists, they had to go out and build one. But, even Make relates back to a tradition of technical writing that, you can find in popular mechanics and popular science. And this is a Mechanics Illustrated 20 cents how-to magazine, one of my favorite monsters, the creature from the Black Lagoon. But on his head it says bandsaw, page 15, and up there, I just love the way someone annotates this, creates their own index on the home page of it to say where to find something. It says electrified lantern, page 123. But almost an homage to these magazines, Make is created in the same trim size that those magazines were in the 50s. It's a sort of unique size on the newsstand these days, but was much more common then. But there was a real enthusiasm in those magazines for building and doing and learning about all kinds of things. And I felt like we could create a new version of that. So Make is for enthusiasts. And I mentioned that hobbyists, sometimes I like to think that they're playing with technology. That they are doing stuff to learn about the technology, but also to learn about themselves. And I like to think that if there's, and I'll read this because you probably in the back can't read it. I almost think that makers, if you, I was to say there's a learning prototype here, it's the garage band. And if you think about it, the garage band, there's no formal education requirement to start a garage band. In fact, you can't find one, right? So you have to start on your own. Second, you begin to look for others with similar levels of interest and ability, right? And you don't necessarily want to find a guitar guru. You want to find someone else who's learning like you are. You know who those gurus are, and you do follow them, but you don't want to necessarily learn in front of them. Third, you want to practice and play. And honestly, you know, as many of you probably have read in all kinds of sources, that's often the key to being good at something, having the time to practice, to do it over and over, and learn about it and play. And the fourth is an opportunity to perform, to demonstrate, and to share with others what you do, because that allows others to give you feedback. It requires that you be some level of proficiency to feel comfortable doing that. And I think it's a really interesting model to think about in terms of education. The other thing I want to say about that I think the garage band model also has is that amateurs and pros today in all areas are using the same tools. I mean, as a publisher, I'm using the same tools as a blogger is, right? And I'm, you know, we're all using YouTube. We're all using digital media cameras. You know, it used to be a great difference between the high-end professional stuff and the low-end consumer stuff. And in the middle, you know, it's merging. And I think this applies to technology as well. So it's a really interesting time for the DIY movement. One of the areas, the thing that's really kind of taken off about this make culture is I created Maker Faire. We've done 5 in the Bay Area as of this year, and we expanded to Detroit and New York City this year as well. And we had about, in the Bay Area, we had about 60,000, 70,000 people over 2 days come. And makers are just showing what they're doing, and we have activities like the kind you're doing on the table today. And, you know, there's just some real hunger for this that we're not getting. You know, to be able to talk to people about what they do and what they love doing is a unique experience. And it almost doesn't matter whether they're into robotics or embroidery or a dozen other different areas. It's still what they love doing, and they share it with you. But in the midst of all the noise of Maker Faire and all that hubbub, you know, what I really value is I'll see a young person down there learning to solder. You know, sitting by himself, doing something, focusing, following some kind of procedure to create a little badge that has a blinky light on it. And so this is a video, and I just want you to watch what's happening. We did this at the Exploratorium, an open make session, and it's just kids working with, there's no music or anything here, but just watch them and their hands at work.
So what we have to do first is it's called stripping the ends of the wire off. So see how at the end of this wire, see how it's metal there? Do that, girl. How much? What are you doing? Okay. Who's still twisting? We just need one wire. You're using 2 wires? One wire. Yes, that is excellent. If you can, I have 3. That's one has only 1. You should strip this one again because there should be at least 3 in there. You don't want to connect LEDs in parallel.
Well, so what do you want to do? Do you want to try adding another battery to it, or?
Well, that's lighting up fine.
Or do you want to try another LED bulb?
Yeah, you got it. with my luck, I'm gonna break this wire.
It's okay if you do. We have more.
Okay.
We have lots.
Show essentially.
Okay.
I have.
Pinball. Good. Just gives you a flavor of, I mean, you could see how much is happening, how so many different styles of learning from each other, learning from talking to each other, inquiry, asking questions. And I really believe that you know, this is more than just using our hands and just doing something. We're learning to shape the world around us. We're learning to engage and change. That's pinball machine. You know, we've all played pinball machines, but you can't get under the glass. You can't change the game. And today, you know, it's particularly in software, but really in the world around us, we can change things. We can modify things. And that's underlying this, you know, that's a very powerful message. And I think the writing that goes with this is sharing how you learn to change things with others and helping others learn to change things as well. So DIY, do it yourself, means a lot of different things, but I think the spirit of it is you can learn to do anything. Once you sit at one of these tables, you could move from one of the tables to another. You know, once you learn to do, what are you doing down here? LED bracelets, right? Once you figured out conductive thread, you could take that and mix it up with something else over here and say, well, I don't want to make a bracelet, I want to make something else. And suddenly, we've unlocked a lot of creativity and a lot of possibilities for kids. But it also, DIY builds community. It connects, just as you are each at a table doing things together, you know, and interacting with each other. Your tables will interact, and you will be connected to different things. Because the fascinating thing, I think, what the Make movement has done is how much we can connect together. You know, I like to make cheese. You know, there's food makers. There's people that like to, you know, garden and make, grow things. We can include lots of things in this DIY area, woodworking, anything you can almost think of. So, but the idea is to bring people together on basis of their shared interests and allow them to learn from each other. And something we'll maybe talk about a little bit later, but one of the things we're doing in Make is putting our projects online and encouraging more of our community to create projects and document them and tell us what they're doing. There are sites also like Instructables that you might have heard of that do a similar thing. But we'll talk about this more, but it's something I just want to put out to you. And then finally, you know, just really this movement that has kind of emerged, and I really can't take credit for it because it's more what people's response to all this is. It has driving this idea that we can learn to do and make and create, and it really does connect us to other people. It's not something, you know, tinkering. We sometimes have the notion, you know, hobbyists and others are working on their own. But through the internet largely today, they're much more connected to each other. And one of the ways that we share is to share the instructions, is to, you know, put up a pool of photos that show what you made and perhaps document the procedure and write it or create a video. So people are, I think what's changed about DIY and why things like Maker Faire are kind of fascinating is DIY is often invisible in our communities. The people who do it at home or they do it in private and you don't see it. There's no business that they go to. They do it on a kitchen table or they do it in a basement or a garage. So partly what the internet has helped us do, as has the magazine and Maker Faire, is to make this more visible. And when you see more people doing it, you believe that you can do it yourself. So I wish you good luck today. I'll be walking around and checking all your different things. But again, I think this is a really valuable way to not only get kids making things, but get them talking and interacting about making things as well. Thank you.